I'm going to reintroduce my panel. They've moved around a bit with us, and we're still here with Kevin Maguire of the Daily Mirror, Laura Hughes of the Financial Times, and Hannah White of the Institute for Government. And we've had a day which has been relatively peaceful until now, we might say. But some of the protesters are back with us, but I think they're making their case, as they have done for many months. For viewers just joining us, let's underline the significance of what we've had today and what this vote means, what it means for the government in terms of its own plans next week, and what it means for the Brexit process and delivering it as the Prime Minister wants to do. So how would you describe that to viewers?
Hugely frustrating for the Prime Minister, because when you actually look at the numbers today, it is not impossible that if it had been an up-down vote on his deal as it stands, he might have got that through. So he is now facing the prospect of writing this letter to the EU, admitting to extending Article 50, which he has repeatedly said and said today that he won't do. This is just a huge obstacle, because now he's going to have to put his bill through Parliament, where it will be scrutinised, where people will seek to amend it, and it's just a bit of a nightmare for him. It's not impossible, and I still believe Number 10 think that it's possible to get this through by the end of October. But going into tomorrow in the Sunday papers, they are not going to want headlines that says, you know, Boris Johnson forced to request extension to Article 50.
And I think what it shows is just how low trust is in Parliament. That Number 10 would say they're frustrated with Oliver Letwin for having brought forward this amendment, but the fact that he's felt he's needed to, and that very senior former Conservative politicians have felt the need to support it, is because they just don't trust the Prime Minister when he says, if I get this vote through, I want to leave with a deal by the 31st of October. They still think there's a risk of a no deal.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? And Kevin, what would you say to viewers about what's happened?
Boris Johnson called the first Saturday sitting of Parliament for 37 years, since the Falklands War in 1982, because he thought it would be a great victory. It would be a platform for him to get his Brexit plan through. And it's completely backfired. It's blown up in his face. It's a Saturday shambles for him. He's lost authority again. And there is no master plan. In truth, we see that time after time after time. He thought he'd get the general election. Labour were wanting, and Labour didn't walk into his trap. He thought he could sideline Parliament. He failed, lost in the Supreme Court, was embarrassed the Queen. And now he's had this setback, which effectively rules out no deal, requires, as Laura said, for him to send the letter he never said he would send. It was always going to be do or die in a ditch on Halloween. Brexit happens or it doesn't. Very difficult for him now to get through his legislation in Parliament to make that all happen. And politics is about momentum. And if he'd have won today, he would have had some momentum, but he hasn't got it. Instead, he's rather deflated yet again.
When we spoke to Katja Adler earlier in Brussels, she said, well, the Commission says they'll wait for communication from the British government. She said they won't be in a rush to respond. They have until the 31st of October. Are we all assuming, despite some noises off, that the EU will agree to an extension when they get the letter?
I think the EU, as ever, is now reconciled to the fact, as someone said to me in Brussels, that the UK wants to jump out of the window, but they don't want to be accused at any point of having pushed us. I think that's the risk for them. They don't want the blame game to start and for people to say, well, if only you'd granted that extension, something different could have happened.
I suspect the EU would like the outline agreement to be implemented and take place. But if it doesn't, of course, they want the UK, if we leave, to go with the deal too. It's in their interest. So I think they would grant that extension. Now, Boris Johnson chose his words very carefully in Parliament when he was responding to his defeat, and he said he wouldn't negotiate that extension. That doesn't mean you don't send the letter. It just means you send it and then you don't bang on their door, ring their bell, bang the table, demand that you get that extension now. You wait and see. He always has hope on his side, and he will try and get that legislation through the Commons, but he has a majority of minus 40-something in the House of Commons. He hasn't got a majority in the House of Lords. All sorts of amendments are going to be put down, no doubt, for a fresh referendum to get the economic impact assessments on what this deal would mean for the UK. It's extraordinary. MPs could have voted for a deal and they don't know what the impact is going to be on the economy, with the Treasury not released him. So he's really in trouble now.
The EU don't want to have to extend. They want this over and done with. But more importantly, they don't want a no-deal Brexit. So they are going to grant an extension. There have been some comments from the French president that were helpful to Boris Johnson over the last few days, then they really said we don't see why you need an extension. We've got the deal. Now come on, get it through Parliament. But they're not going to ultimately be left responsible for a no-deal Brexit, so they will extend it. Could they maybe extend it for less time? Could they say, we'll extend it till you get the legislation through and help Boris Johnson in that way? But crucially, he doesn't want Sunday front page stories tomorrow that have a picture of him writing a letter requesting this extension.
Let's help viewers with next week, Monday, Tuesday, and what Jacob Rees-Mogg, the leader of the House, has announced today, which is in effect what we call a meaningful vote, kind of thing we were expecting today, probably on Monday. Now, what are the stakes here? And start with you, Kevin. What does that mean?
Yeah, they're incredibly high stakes. Monday, Tuesday of next week was supposed to be the Queen's speech debate and a vote. Almost certainly would have been defeated because he hasn't got that majority. Now, if he attempts to bring back his vote unamended by Oliver Letwin, saying, yes, we agree, the House of Commons, Parliament is going to adopt his plan, then we'll have the legislation, he would have a triumph if he got that through. But the Speaker may yet rule, well, you've already had one go, so you can't bring it back in the same session. We've seen this before. So they will now all eyes will be on an interventionist Speaker.
Yes, of course.
Who is given the executive a hard time all the way along. He's championed Parliament and the MPs against the government. So they will be fretting in 10 Downing Street that their latest cunning plan doesn't even allow it to go before the House of Commons.
How do we explain the context, I mean, of the thinking in Downing Street as they think about this process, but obviously thinking further ahead towards a potential general election, and how they sell this strategy to people, whatever the outcome is. How does Monday fit into that? I mean, what is the purpose politically of Monday?
What has to happen for us to leave with a deal is you have to have a meaningful vote and you have to put the deal into legislation. It is possible that you could use the legislation to say you don't need the meaningful vote, but the government's calculation will be they can't start on the bill until Tuesday at the earliest, because they're going to have the first reading on Monday if that's what they choose to do. They will be trying to frame this to say we are doing everything we possibly can to fulfill our pledge. So if they end up with an election, they can say it wasn't our fault, we were doing as much as we possibly could, and it was Parliament, it was the courts, it was everyone else who stopped us.